The music at the Founders Gala was thunderous, a blur of string arrangements and polite applause, yet the silence that slammed into my chest was far louder. It hit the instant my son, Jet, stepped through the ballroom doors. He was only 12. Wearing the suit I pressed earlier that morning, except now the tie was twisted to the side, and a darkening bruise carved itself beneath his left eye, a hideous violet blotch under the warm glow of the chandeliers. I went still, my fingers locked round my champagne flute. Before I could move toward him, my nephew Cannon, 16 years old and already dripping with the smug confidence of someone who believes the world belongs to him, leaned back in his chair. He grinned, loud enough that the investors nearby heard. "I just taught him a lesson in toughness," Cannon announced, swirling his drink like a grown man in a movie. "Grandma says I'm never wrong anyway." I waited, braced for outrage. For my parents, Roger and Brenda, the king and queen of Sterling and Sons Vineyard, to stand for their youngest grandson. Instead, uneasy laughter trickled around the table. My father chuckled, that dry, condescending laugh that signaled the guests to relax, and my mother raised her glass in a toast to Cannon, smiling as if violence was a cute prank. That was the moment everything shifted. The cruelty wasn't the bruise on Jet's face, it was the laughter. Before I tell you what I did next, I need to know who's truly here with me. Comment where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Let's see how far this story travels. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. I didn't throw champagne in my sister's face. In the Sterling family, emotions are blood in the water, and I refuse to bleed. I set my glass on the white tablecloth with a soft, precise click, walked straight to Jet, placed a hand on his shoulder, and guided him out of the ballroom. I didn't glance at my parents. I didn't acknowledge my sister Bianca, too busy examining her reflection in the back of a silver spoon in the hallway. Jet was shaking. I crouched down, inspecting the bruise. It was bad, but nothing fractured. "Go to the car," I said, my voice steady. "Lock the doors, headphones on." He nodded, eyes wide, tearful, and sprinted for the exit. I watched him disappear through the glass doors, and something unfamiliar flickered in my chest. It wasn't sadness. I didn't cry. I didn't wonder why they hated us. I simply turned toward the security wing. For years, I had been the operational backbone of this vineyard. While Bianca posed in Paris and hosted tastings in Napa in gowns, more expensive than my car, I was out in the vines at 3 a.m. lighting smudge pots to fight frost. I was the one negotiating with distributors during bad harvests. I was the worker bee, the invisible gear that kept the wine flowing and the profits soaring, so Bianca could be the glamorous face of the brand. I accepted the insults, the erasure, all because of the estate trust. My grandfather structured it decades ago. The deed, the house, the $4.5 million legacy would unlock when the youngest male heir turned 18. That heir was Jet. But there was a catch. The heir had to be declared of sound mind and character by the trustees. If he wasn't, the trust dissolved, and everything transferred to the eldest living sibling, Bianca. I endured their cruelty to protect my son's future. I thought if I worked hard enough, kept this place thriving, they'd allow him to inherit. I was wrong, sitting alone in the dim security room that night, watching the glowing server lights blink. I understood the truth. They didn't want Jet to inherit. They were afraid he might. I didn't check the ballroom footage yet. I needed a baseline. I needed to know whether this was the first incident or part of a strategy. I spent an hour downloading files. My mind didn't flare with rage. It sharpened with calculation. Anger doesn't win wars, strategy does. 3 days after the gala, the campaign escalated. We were preparing for a private buyer from Hong Kong. The tasting room filled with our most valuable vintages, bottles retailing at $3,000 each. Jet sat quietly in the corner, sketching, trying to be invisible. Cannon strolled in, twirling a lacrosse stick like a weapon. I was behind the bar, polishing glasses, when I heard the crash. I looked up to see the family's heirloom crystal decanter from the 1920s shattered across the stone floor. Wine spread out like blood around Jet's sneakers. Cannon towered over him, eyes wide in dramatic performance. "Oh my God," he shouted, pitching his voice just right for an audience. "Why are you so clumsy? Mum, he just knocked it over. He's unstable." Bianca stormed into the room, heels cracking against the slate. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't ask about the athletic stick in Cannon's hand. She looked only at Jet, shrinking in his chair, clutching his sketchbook like armor. "Jet, seriously," she sighed, loud enough for the staff. "First, the fight at the gala, now this. You're destructive. Honey, maybe we need to have you evaluated." Evaluated, a legal word wrapped in fake concern. She wasn't scolding him. She was building a record, constructing a case that Jet wasn't mentally fit to inherit. Jet looked at me, begging silently, but stayed quiet. He was learning the brutal truth of the scapegoat. Truth doesn't matter when the judge is also the executioner. I came around the bar. "Cannon," I said, voice flat. The decanter was in the center of the table. Jet is 4 feet away. Physics alone says he didn't touch it. Bianca spun toward me, smiling the way snakes smile. "Don't cover for him, Sierra. This is why he's maladjusted. He doesn't need coddling. He needs discipline. Imagine someone like him running this place one day. The liability." She said the quiet part out loud. It was never about the decks. It was about the trust. I looked at Cannon, who was smirking, tapping his lacrosse stick against his leg like a countdown. They weren't just bullies. They were constructing a legal narrative. I didn't argue. Arguments imply the other side might listen. I signaled the cleaning crew and pulled Jet out of the room. That night, I went to confront my parents in the library. Roger and Brenda sat by the crackling fire, sipping the brandy I bottled for them. "We need to talk about Cannon," I said from the doorway. I didn't sit, my mother sighed. "Oh, Sierra, don't start." Bianca told us what happened. Jet is going through a phase. Boys get rowdy. Cannon shattered the decanter, I said. Cannon gave Jet that black eye. You saw it at the gala. You laughed. We were diffusing tension, my father replied, stern. We have a brand to protect. Cannon is spirited, a leader. Jet is soft. He needs to toughen up if he wants to carry the sterling name. He's 12, I said, and he's being hunted. You're being dramatic, my mother snapped. We support each other. Bianca is worried about Jet's mental state, and frankly, so are we. If he can't handle teasing, how can he handle a multi-million-dollar estate? I stared at them, really stared, and it clicked. They weren't blind to the abuse. They needed it. If they acknowledged Cannon's cruelty, they'd have to admit the monster they raised in Bianca, and the one they were shaping in Cannon. To face the truth would shatter their fantasy of the perfect sterling legacy. They would rather sacrifice my son than their pride. That is the enabler's paradox. The enabler doesn't protect the abuser out of loyalty. They protect themselves from the shame of the truth. The tiny hope I'd kept that my parents would someday choose morality died in that library. And its death was a relief. Because when hope dies, clarity begins. Okay, I said quietly. I understand your position now. My mother relaxed, thinking I was surrendering. Good, now stay for dinner, and let's move past all this. I'm not staying for dinner, I replied. I have work to do. I walked out into the cold night. The vineyard stretched before me, endless rows of vines. I had pruned with my own hands. They believed they had beaten me into silence. But they forgot who actually ran this place. They knew how to drink the wine. I knew how to make it. And I also knew where all the cameras were. I headed straight to the barrel-aging cellar, underground, echoing, filled with oak and the heavy smell of fermentation. Bianca never entered. The humidity ruined her hair. I sat at the workstation, logged into the server. The house security was run by a third-party firm, but I installed the backup systems for production myself. I located the gala footage, found the moment Jet entered with the bruise, but the ballroom audio was drowned by music. So I switched to the service corridor feed, the quiet hallway where staff carried trays in and out. I scrolled and found them 20 minutes before Jet walked in with the bruise. Bianca and Cannon in the corridor, Cannon scrolling on his phone, bored. Bianca gripping his arm, face sharp, tense. I put on headphones and raised the volume. The audio was crystal clear. You have to make it look like an accident, Bianca whispered, but you need to make him react. We need a scene, Cannon. If he cries, he looks weak. If he screams, he looks unstable. Either way, we win. He's boring. Mom can't unwind. He just stands there, then hit him. Bianca hissed. Hit him where the suit covers it. We need him to scream, not bleed. If he has an outburst at the gala, the board will deem him unfit. Do you understand? This is a booth money. Do you want the car or not? Fine, Keenan said, shoving his phone in Tohei's pocket. I'll handle it. I paused. Thy video, my hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the sheer voltage of my rage. It wasn't just bullying. It was conspiracy. It was solicitation, oath assault. Bianca wasn't just a bad sister. She was a criminal. But I wasn't Doan. If they were planning to dissolve the trust, they had to have a reason. They had to have a plan for the money. My parents stared at the screen, their mouths slightly open. They looked like they were watching a car crash in slow motion. They couldn't look away. 10th video, cut to the accident in that tasting room. The angle I had pulled from the backup camera clearly showed Cannon checking the door, then deliberately swinging the lacrosse stick toe, smashed the decanter while Jet sat 4 feet away. I paused the video on Thefram of Bianca's face in the hallway, twisted with greed and malice. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of a narrative collapsing. Bianca was pale, her skin matching her silk blouse. She was trembling. Her hand, still hovering near her glass, shook violently. She tried to grip the stem of the wineglass to steady herself, but her nerves failed her clink. The glass slipped from her. It hit the edge of the tablion, shattered, sending shards of crystal and water across the polished wood. The sound was like a gunshot. It's fake, Bianca whispered, her voice cracking. She doctored it. It's AI, you can't believe this. It's time-stamped from thy internal servers. I said, my voice cutting through her panic, and it matches the metadata on your own iPad. It turned to the screen again and swiped Toth next file. The email, the contract with the developers, the sale price off the state. You weren't saving the legacy. Bianca, I said, looking directly at her. You were liquidating it. You've been pre-selling this land for 3 months. You just need a jet out of the way to cash the check. I looked at my parents. You wanted to protect the family name. There it is. Your golden child soliciting assault on a minor to My father looked at the contract on the screen, then at Bianca. The color had drained from his face. For the first time in his life, he couldn't find a way to The denial he had used as a shield was gone, shattered along with the glass on the floor. Bianca, my mother whispered, her voice horrifyingly small. Is this true? Bianca stood up, her chair knocking over backward. I did it for us. This place is a money pit. We could have I was trying to save us from drowning in this dirt. No, I said, you were trying to steal what belongs to my son. I walked back to the table and picked up the guardianship papers. It ripped them in half. The sound sharp and The meeting is adjourned. I said, and Bianca, you're fired. Bianca stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from sea water. There were no clever The video evidence and the contract on the screen had stripped her of her armor. She looked at our parents, expecting a bailout. But Roger and Brenda were still staring at the shattered glass on the floor. Paralyzed the undeniable proof of their own failure. You can't fire me, Bianca spat, though her voice lacked its usual. I'm a partner. I own shares. Yo own nan voting shares. I corrected her. My tone is dry as dust and per the bylaws of the company. Any officer who engages in criminal activity or actions that devalue the brand can be removed for cause immediately. Soliciting gas on a minor and conspiring to defraud the trust constitutes cause. I've already sent the termination letter, HR. Your access cards have been deactivated. I turned to my parents. They looked small in their high-backed chairs. The grandeur of the dining room with its velvet drapes and mahogany finish suddenly felt like a stage set for a play that had been cancelled. And as for you, I said, see her, please. My mother said, her voice trembling. She reached out a hand across the table. But I didn't take it. We can't fix this. Well, send Cannon away. Well, get him help, but don't tear the family apart. Think of the scandal. The scandal is already contained. Is said because you are leaving. Leaving? My father asked, blink. The main house is property of the state trust. I explained. It is designated for the primary operator of the vineyard and the heir. Since neither of you are operating this vineyard, and you have actively endangered the heir, your residency is no longer tenable. E pulled 2 envelopes from my jacket pocket and slid them across the table. These are eviction notices. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises. I suggest you go to the townhouse in the city. It's comfortable and it's far away from Jet. You're evicting your own parents? My father asked, scandalized. After everything we gave you, you gave me a job. I said, and I did it. I saved this vineyard while you drank its profits. The transaction is complete. I didn't want for them to argue. I turned and walked out of the dining room. The sound of my heels on the hard wood echoing the finality of my decision. I didn't look back. 2 days later, I stood on the wraparound porch and watched the procession of luxury SUVs navigate the gravel driveway. Bianca's car was first, loaded down with designer luggage. My parents followed, their faces grim behind tinted windows as their taillights faded round the bend, disappearing behind the rows of cabinet vines. I felt a physical sensation in my chest. It wasn't joy. It wasn't triumph. It was a deep, aching, phantom pain. People always tell you that family is part of you, like an arm or a leg. They tell you that cutting them off is natural, that you will be incomplete without them. But they are wrong. Toxic family isn't a limb. It's gangrene. It's a rot that starts in the extremities and works its way to the heart. Cutting them off didn't feel like freedom. It felt like surgery. It was bloody and traumatic, and it left as I stood there, gripping, thurling, feeling the silence of the house press against me. I grieved fourth parents I never had, and the sister I wished existed. But as I took a breath, filling my lungs with the crisp air of the vineyard, I realized something else. The infection was gone. The fever was breaking. I was in pain, yes, but I was going to live. I went inside and found Jet in the kitchen. Hugh was making a sandwich, humming to himself. The bruise on his eye was fading to a sickly yellow, but his holders were down. He didn't flinch when I walked in. "They're gone," he hissed, not looking up. "Yeah," I said. "They're gone." He nodded, took a bite off his sandwich, and smiled. It was Asmokiet's smile, but it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. 1 year later, the sun was setting over Thieveley, painting the vines in shades of gold and violet. I stood at the entrance of the estate, watching a workman finish mounting the new sign. It was made of reclaimed oak from one of the old. The letters were burned into the wood, simple and strong. Jet's Reserve underneath. In smaller script, established 2024. We had rebranded. The Sterling and Sons label with its pretentious crest and heavy font was written. The new vintage was lighter, more honest, and it was selling out faster than we could bottle it. Jet walked up beside me. He was taller now, 13, and sprouting up like a weed. He was carrying a sketchbook. "As always, it looks good," he said. "It looks like the truth," I replied. He leaned against me and I put my arm around his shoulders. We didn't need a big family dinner. We didn't need approval from people whom loved us when we were useful. We heard the vines. We had the work. And we hoed the silence of a house where no one was afraid. I thought about the journey that brought us here. I thought a booth bruise, the dropped glass, and feckled calculation in the server room. I realized that my parents were right about one thing. Heritage matters. Booth heritage isn't what you inherit. It's what you build. Family isn't blood. It's the people who don't make you bleed. It's the people who stand in front. Oh, few, when the world tries to break you. If you have ever had to cut off a limb to save your life, if you have ever had to choose your sanity over your DNA, I want you to know that you are rent damaged. You are a survivor. Drop a comment below and tell me your story. Let me know if you made it to the other side. You aren't alone.